Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. In today's preseason video, we're going to go through the hooker position, looking at the best kind of guns, mid-ranges and cheapies to consider when building a team ahead of the 2022 season. So if you do enjoy it, really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already and you want to see more preseason SuperCoach content, and let's get straight into it. So I also just want to make mention, if you haven't already seen one of my previous preseason videos on picking your team and how to best build your squad ahead of the 2022 season, I highly recommend checking that out, because I do talk about the hooker position being one of those positions where, because you can only choose 2 slots, it is an important position. I think it is a good priority as well to try fit in at least one gun hooker, in my own personal opinion. And I think there are 4 kind of guns that we can consider in this position. I've got Harry Grant, Reed Mahoney, Damien Cook and Cameron McInnes in this particular category. So there's not too many options in my opinion that I think are worthwhile considering. I think these are the 4 standout options, and if you haven't seen my previous NRL SuperCoach videos on my old channel, you probably would know that I'm a very big fan of Harry Grant, and I do think that he is the standout hooker gun to go for. He is obviously the most expensive at 645k, but he definitely justifies that with that average that he got last season. What I do like about Harry Grant is the wide variety of ways that he was scoring his points in 2021. So you can see from this bar chart, I've got base, evade, create and score. So base just refers to kind of your hit ups and tackles, evade refers to your kind of offloading and tackle breaking ability, create is obviously things like line break assists and try assists, and scoring is obviously scoring tries himself. And as you can see, it's a nice even split. And what is worthwhile noting as well, in the table below me, you can see he averaged around 59 minutes in 2021 with a PPM of about 1.24. Now obviously a lot of that PPM does come from those higher upside attacking plays, but it's the 59 minutes which really intrigues me. He had a bit of an on-off season in 2021. He had injuries and he was just missing a few games here and there, but he still managed to pump out a 70 plus average. And I think Brandon Smith going to the Roosters in 2023, I do think Harry Grant potentially can get extra minutes. So I think with extra minutes and still being able to maintain that kind of creative output, because I do think that is something that he is able to keep up. The base is not as high compared to the others, but I don't think that's much of an issue because he has got those other outlets and other avenues to points. So Harry Grant, I think in that Melbourne Storm team, which I do expect to perform very well again in 2022, I think because of that wide variety of scoring potential, I think Harry Grant for me is the standout option. Reed Mahoney proved to be very, very good with an average of 68. I do feel like it was a bit of a career year from Reed Mahoney. Previous to last season, he was more known for getting a lot of good base stats, but not too much creativity. We can definitely see that stepped up in 2021. The base is still pretty good at 45 averaging a game, but the 14 of creative points per game last season was quite a good addition to his point scoring, which really saw his average jump up, but still doesn't quite match up to the likes of Harry Grant. You can see the minutes were pretty consistent for Mahoney. He normally does play the full 80 minutes. The downside, I guess, for 2022 is that Mitch Rain has come into the Eels, so potentially that could eat into Mahoney's minutes a little bit. We know that he is leaving the Eels for 2023. Whether or not that means they're going to maybe phase him out slightly, I don't necessarily think that's as much of a consideration, because I think the Eels are still going to try push for the finals positions, and I think Reed Mahoney is a big part of that. I do expect him to still play considerable minutes, and a pretty decent PPM of 0.92 in the 74 minutes can lead to a pretty solid floor for Mahoney. I just don't think he quite has the upside of Harry Grant, because Harry Grant, averaging 59 minutes last season, was still averaging better than the likes of Mahoney. And Grant plays just in a slightly better team, I think, than the Parramatta Eels. Personally, I'm not going to opt for Reed Mahoney. One benefit with him, though, is that they do have a pretty nice opening draw as well to begin the season. So Mahoney could be something that you start off with, and then maybe as a bit of a stepping stone to Harry Grant. And I'm just not sure how sustainable his performance from 2021 is going to be for 2022. Now, Damien Cook is the third kind of gun I wanted to chat about. Damien Cook's average has been sliding in the past couple of seasons, which has been really surprising given that we thought with all the new rule changes, speeding up the game, we thought that was going to suit Damien Cook to a T, but we really saw a lot of volatility in his point scoring last season and even in the season before, so it was really hard to kind of consistently, know what you were getting from him. Overall average of 66 was still pretty healthy, but I think it was just the volatility which definitely turned off a lot of people, because it was definitely bolstered by a couple of games where he scored like 120, 130. He definitely has got the high upside, but he didn't really quite have the consistency of either Mahoney or Harry Grant. And because his average has been decreasing in the past few seasons, I think part of that is due to Cody Walker and Latrell just forming such a dangerous combination and really excelling in the past couple of seasons. So I don't think they've needed Damien Cook to be as much of an attacking force. And so you can see the creativity and the scoring points are a bit less than the likes of Mahoney and Grant. So he obviously can have those games where he scores a couple of tries, but I just don't think we're going to quite get the consistency from him. The minutes is pretty solid, obviously at 78 per game, but I just don't think the consistency is there for me. So personally, I'm not going to go for Damien Cook. The Rabbitohs don't have the best draw to start the season as well, so I am definitely preferring the likes of Grant and Marnie. Now, Cam McInnes missed 2021 through injury, so the stats that I have presented are from 2020, but he had an amazing 2020 season for SuperCoach, averaging 76, and a lot of that is just due to the base stats. You can see the base stats there. 66 points a game he was averaging was just insane, so he didn't quite need, the kind of evasive, creative, and scoring potential as much as the other three hookers, because his base was just that strong. You can see he was averaging around 79 minutes as well when he was playing for the Dragons. It is worthwhile to note though now that he has moved to the Sharks, and obviously he's coming back from a long-term injury, so I think it's a bit of a risk to start with him as your kind of sole hooker gun, just because we just don't quite know what his kind of minutes are going to be like with the new Sharks rotation. They've got also a lot of new forwards as well, like Finucane, so we're just not quite sure what the minutes are going to be like. Preseason trials will probably be very helpful for that. He is dual listed, so you can also pick him up in the second row forward, and I think that's probably a better place to get him if you do want him, because the second row forward, you've just got a few more slots to play with, but the hooker position, you only have 2 to choose from. So I personally wouldn't be advocating to go for McInnes in that hooker slot. I think if you want to go for him in second row forward, that's a different story, but I think I would definitely be considering the other three, and based on the kind of narrative that I'm projecting, it really is between Harry Grant and Reid Marnie for me, and I think it's undoubtedly Harry Grant probably is the standout hooker option to go for if you can fit him in at 645k. The only downside that I should mention with Harry Grant before I start preaching him too much is that he is a doubt to actually start in round 1. He's coming back from a bit of a knee injury in the preseason, so you might obviously have to factor in that you might not be able to actually play him in round 1, but if you have a good enough second backup hooker, I think it's worthwhile still keeping Harry Grant on the bench, because we know how good of a SuperCoach asset he is, and 100% he is my standout choice as a hooker gun for 2022. Next, we'll discuss some mid-range hooker options, although overall, to be honest, I'm not that enthused by any of the kind of mid-range hooker options. I do think that there is a bit of a standout kind of combination of having one clear-cut hooker gun and then a cheapie. I just don't know if the mid-range is going to offer enough value or enough kind of points upside to justify either cash generation or a good enough points average to keep in the team. But the 4 that I wanted to consider here was Jacob Liddle, Api Coruscant, Reece Robson, and Josh Hodgson. They all kind of range between that 450 to 500k range, but I think I would probably try to fit in at least another 90k just to get up to Reid Marnie, and obviously from there I'd probably say maybe try to find another 50k to get to Harry Grant. As you can see here, none of these guys' stats are that kind of different from each other. They're pretty comparable. They all offer around the kind of 40-point base. Hodgson noticeably has the best kind of creative statistics, which we kind of see in general play. He's quite creative in terms of, sending over a lot of the Raiders forwards for tries, because that is one of the characteristics of their play. A lot of their forwards do score tries, so Hodgson around the ruck can offer that try assist potential, whereas the other three don't have as much of that. Coruscant was actually very good in 2020, but he did have an injury hampered 2021, and I think with Mitch Kenny getting better and better, I see potentially that Coruscant's minutes will be a little bit more volatile. He definitely still could feature as well for New South Wales instead of Origin, so minutes wise I'm not quite sure if they're going to stay around 68. I do think he is still the first choice hooker for the Panthers, but I still think it's a bit of a punt to go for Coruscant at the beginning of the season. I think it's a bit of a similar story as well with Jacob Liddle, because we did see Jake Simpkin actually feature quite a bit for the West Tigers last season, and you'd expect that he probably would get slightly more involvement as well, and so you could see maybe Little's minutes go down just a little bit more. So for those two reasons, I'm not too keen on getting either Liddle or Coruscant. And Hodgson, he is also on the way out for the Raiders in 2023, and there is also a backup of Tom Starling as well, so Hodgson's minutes might also be a little bit at risk as well. So you're getting a bit of the general narrative here is that I'm just not quite overall enthusiastic about the mid-range hooker options. Reece Robson is the first choice hooker for the Cowboys, but we did see quite a bit of rotation there as well. We saw Jake Granville play there at times. Again, I'm just not quite sure if we're going to see enough of a difference in minutes that he's going to substantially increase on his points average from last season to justify him going up in price quite a bit. So I think for me, these 4 guys are kind of guys who'll have a bit of a watch list. If there's a significant injury to one of the hooker guns that we've talked about, or potentially the kind of competition that affects either one of these 4 guys, if that person gets injured or leaves the club, then I think maybe it's worthwhile having a look at them. But to start the season, personally, I'm not looking to go for any of these 4. And finally, we're going to be talking about the cheapies and the potential cash cows. Now, before I had kind of thought about this in a little bit more detail, thinking there could be some variety in which cheapie you go for, but we have found out now in the past couple of days that Jaden Brayley of the Newcastle Knights has suffered a pretty significant Achilles injury, and it has been confirmed that Chris Randall, as it stands, will be the starting number 9 hooker for the Newcastle Knights. And because Brayley's injury is pretty significant, around a 6-month injury, you could expect that if Randall locks down pretty significant minutes at a starting price of 245k with pretty decent base and an increase in minutes from the 38 he was averaging last season, he will be the cheapie hooker I think to go for from the start of the season. There's been some talk of the Knights trying to recruit a emergency backup hooker position because they're a little bit thin now in that position, so even Josh Hodgson has been rumoured. But I think if we don't get any extra information and Randall is confirmed to be the starting number 9 for the Knights at the beginning of the season, I think he hands down probably is the best kind of hooker cheapie to go for. Probably still is worthwhile quickly discussing Aaron Clark and Aaron Booth as well, because Mitch Rain has left the Titans. It kind of opened up the door for a bit of competition between either Aaron Clark or Aaron Booth, who's just moved up to the Titans from the Melbourne Storm. Whichever of these two was locked in as a starting number 9 could be viewed as a decent kind of early season cheapie or cash cow, but I think with Randall kind of being cemented maybe a little bit more securely as a starting number 9 at the beginning of the season, I think he definitely ranks above them in terms of a cheapie hooker to go for. That's it guys, that is my kind of breakdown of the best guns, mid-ranges and cheapies to consider in the hooker position when building your 2022 SuperCoach side. Hopefully you guys found some value out of that video. Any feedback or thoughts or comments, really appreciate it in the comments down below. If you like the video, really appreciate a thumbs up, helps the channel out as we're just starting to grow, and do subscribe to the channel as well if you do want to see more content like this throughout the season. But until then, see you in the next video.